Moscow is under attack, and that's because siege of Moscow has begun. You see, while Putin was hiding in his bunker during this drone attack, the Russian citizens were in panic. That panic did not start with this drone attack, and it will not end with this drone attack. You see, this is not just about some singular drone attack. This is about Moscow as the heart of Russia, feeling the pain of war that Putin started and running out of resources that the city needs to fuel its population. Let me show you what I mean. On your screen, I have a clip showing Russians waiting in lines of cars to get gas at gas stations. You see this happening because Russia is having a fuel shortage due to Ukrainian drone attacks. Now, this is not from some far-fetched regions in Russia. This is on the St. Petersburg-Moscow highway. These are two major population centers. In fact, these are the only two population centers that Putin cares about. And now even these cities are experiencing the pain of Ukrainian attacks. Russian elites are realizing that the war has come home, and it's not just about their cars. Soon they will not be able to fly to their vacations either. You see, sanctions have gotten so bad in Russia that yesterday, Kremlin finally had to literally beg for sanctions relief. And I'm not kidding. This is what Kremlin sent to the International Civil Aviation Organization, a UN organization that takes care of aviation-related stuff. They're responsible for aviation sanctions against Russian airlines. Russia claims that if these sanctions are not relaxed, Russian planes will literally start falling out of the sky. According to Russian officials, this is because they just don't have the spare parts to maintain their Boeing and Airbus aircrafts. So, unless they get sanctions relief so they can buy those spare parts, the fleet will have to be grounded. Now, I want you guys to be prepared for this next part. If you're standing up, maybe sit down. Because Russia says that if planes start falling off the skies and Russians die, that blood will be on UN's hand. It will not be Putin's fault for starting this invasion. Of course, they didn't say that last part, but they're trying to guilt trip the UN to give them sanctions relief. As if that wasn't laughable enough, yesterday I was actually talking to General Ben Hodges while this statement came out, so I got his reaction to this news. Let's listen in.
Actually, interesting point there. Just this morning, I think, because the UN meeting is about to happen, and Russia is asking UN for sanctions relief because they're saying these sanctions are threatening their civilian airlines and passenger safety. That's why they're asking for sanctions relief. So I guess sanctions are hurting. So we do need to just double down more, right? That's the goal. Shadow fleet, what you've been saying.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's too many loopholes. I mean, you've even got some American components made by American companies are showing up inside Russian drones. So not only do you need to have sanctions, but you have to enforce them. And we have not done a good job of that, nor have all the other countries. So making sure that Russia is not able to produce quality precision weapons is an important part of this. I have exactly zero sympathy for Aeroflot or the ability of Russians to fly on holidays while they are inside Ukraine, killing innocent Ukrainian women and men and children. So that's a priority choice for them. If they want to have airline maintenance, okay, then they should use what they have for that instead of for making rockets that attack Ukrainian cities.
Now, these two situations is exactly what I mean when I say the siege of Moscow has begun. Because just think about it, in the old days, a siege would be to surround the city, cut the supply line, and starve out the population into a surrender. Well, that's what Ukraine is doing without actually physically surrounding Russian cities. Using drones, Ukraine is striking trains, railway junctions, fuel depot, refineries, warehouses, and of course, we cannot forget about the sanctions that are making it difficult for Russia to carry on like usual. That's basically achieving everything an old-school siege would achieve. And the sad part is that Russian citizens are suffering because of Putin's decision. Now, of course, we cannot forget about the Ukrainian drone attack that happened last night because it does play an important role. It lets the Russian citizens know that the war is not happening in some far-flung region. It's happening right at their borders, and now it's reaching into their everyday life, and they have to start questioning if it's all worth it. So let's get into exactly what happened last night. I first learned about this from this report. It's the mayor of Moscow announcing to the Russians that Moscow is being attacked. According to him, there were 10 explosions heard around the city. We quickly found out that these were Ukrainian drones because we learned that the sky over Moscow was completely closed and flights were being delayed massively at all the airports. Now, unfortunately, there was one plane that was already in the city, in Moscow, but couldn't actually land because airports were closed. So, it was flying over the Moscow sky, but as you guys can see from the clip on your screen, it was flying very low to the ground. That's roughly 10-story building according to my counting the window calculation. Not a very scientific method, but based on my counting, it's 10, maybe 12 stories, and the plane is barely flying above that. Now, I'm not an aviation expert, so I had to research why it's doing that. Well, according to my research, it seems that doesn't matter how much Putin claims that Russia is a superpower, they actually don't have very good radars. And we have actually seen proof of that because they have shot down multiple different civilian planes, thinking it was a Ukrainian drone. I'm sure you guys remember the Azerbaijani plane that Russians shot down last Christmas, because the Azerbaijani people do remember that, and they are still very mad about that. Now, according to reports online, this plane was instructed to stay below the drone altitude so Russians don't accidentally mistake this plane for a drone and shoot it down. That's exactly why drone was barely flying above this mid-rise building they have. Talking about drones, let's get into some clips that I was able to find from this Ukrainian attack that took place. Here's the clip of a drone flying into Moscow before approaching its target.
Четвертый уже.
Next up, we have the clip of the aftermath. It's in very distance, but you can see the smoke rising from whatever the drone hit. Now, we actually don't know what the drone hit exactly, and that has to do with a new Russian law that I'll talk about in just a second. But first, let's look at the clip. Now, I don't want to bore you guys too much just showing clips, and we'll get to the analysis in just 1 second. But before that, I do want to show this one last clip. In this clip, we can see the Russian authorities trying to make sure the Russian citizens don't see the aftermath of a Ukrainian strike or maybe a Ukrainian drone debris that fell after it was taken down. Now, unfortunately, we don't have that many great clips from this attack as we would have had if this attack was just a week before. The reason for this is a new Russian law that now bans sharing footage of Ukrainian air attacks that are happening inside Russia. This law was just passed 4 days ago, and this is just Putin's yet another attempt to keep Russians in the dark about how badly this war is going. If Russian society gets more information about successful Ukrainian attacks inside of Russia, it will most definitely undermine society's faith in Putin's ability to lead the country. Now, this is where I actually want to bring you guys' attention to a comment Putin made roughly 10 months ago. This was at the end of 2024, and every year at the end of the year, he holds this big press conference where he basically answers any question journalists may have about Russia and his leadership. Now, at this press conference, foreign journalists also can ask him any question, with one condition. Those questions are not actually broadcasted inside Russia. They are only published outside Russia, so these are purely for international audience. Now, BBC actually has one of the bravest correspondent in Russia, and that person is Steve Rosenberg. The reason I say this is because the questions he's asking to someone like Vladimir Putin, who's the dictator of Russia, are not easy questions to ask. but consistently every year he's asking the hard questions, all the while living inside Russia. On top of that, in this question that you're about to see, he asked Putin that Russia is no longer safe because of the war you started, and the war that you started is not going well. How do you feel about all that? And you can see Putin get extremely visibly angry and out of control while answering this question. Once you see the answer, you can understand why he doesn't want Russian citizens to see this question and that's the answer. This is purely for foreign audience. Let's play the clip.
Итоговую декларацию БРИКС, и там говорится о необходимости.
I read the final declaration of the BRICS summit. It talks about the need for global and regional stability and security and a fair world. And the motto of Russia's BRICS presidency includes these ideas of fairness and security. But what does that have in common with your actions over the last 2.5 years, with the Russian invasion of Ukraine? Where are fairness, stability, and security here? Including Russia's security, because before the start of the special military operation, there were no drone attacks on Russian territory, no shelling of Russian towns, no foreign troops occupying Russian territory. There was none of this.
Российской территории, ни обстрелов российских городов, ни иностранных войск.
And finally, how does that match up with recent statements by British intelligence that Russia aims to spread chaos on the streets of Britain and Europe through arson and acts of sabotage and so on? Where's the stability here? Thank you.
Британии и Европы поджогами, диверсиями и так далее. Вот где стабильность? Спасибо.
Да. Значит, начну с безопасности России, потому что для меня это самое главное. Вы сказали про удары дронов там и так далее. Да, этого не было.
Let me start with Russia's security, because for me, that's the priority. You mentioned drone attacks and so on. Yes, this didn't happen before, but the situation was far worse. The situation was like this.
Наладить контакты и отношения с
In response to our constant, persistent proposals to develop contacts and relations with countries of the Western world, they always tried to put us in our place. I can tell you that for sure. On the surface, it was all very friendly. But in fact, they always tried to put us in our place. And from this place, Russia would have ended up being reduced to the status of a second-class state, whose sole function is supplier of raw materials, resulting, to a large extent, in the loss of our country's sovereignty. In that condition, Russia is not only unable to develop, it cannot exist. Russia cannot exist if it loses its sovereignty. That's the key point.
А Россия в таком качестве не только развиваться, она существовать не может. Россия не может существовать.
And getting Russia out of this situation, strengthening our sovereignty and independence in the economy, finances, military affairs, increases our security and creates conditions for its confident development in the future, as an independent state fully fledged and self-sufficient. With the kind of partners we have in BRICS who respect Russia's independence, respect our traditions, and whom we treat likewise. Now, to the question of security in general, I've already spoken about Russia's security. I understand what you're saying. But from the point of view of security, is it fair when, for years, our partners ignored our constant requests not to expand NATO to the east?
И к которым мы относимся таким же образом.
Is it fair to lie to our face promising there will be no such expansion, and then do this in violation of your obligations?
Но разве справедливо с точки зрения безопасности годами игнорировать наши постоянные обращения?
Is it fair to move right up to our underbelly, for example in Ukraine, and begin building, not preparing, but already building military bases? Is that fair? Is it fair to carry out a state coup that I mentioned in answer to your colleague's question, without any concern for international law and all principles of international law and the UN Charter, financing a coup in a different country, in this case Ukraine, and pushing the situation towards a hot phase? Is that fair in terms of global security?
Отвечая на вопрос вашего коллеги. Наплевав на международное право и на все принципы международного права и устава ООН, финансируя переворот в другой стране, в данном случае на Украине, и подтолкнув ситуацию к ее
And is it fair to violate your OSCE obligations when all countries in the West you cannot have security for one country if it violates another country's security?
Взятые на себя обязательства в рамках ОБСЕ, когда все страны...
We said, don't do this. It violates our security. NATO's expansion, they did it all the same. Is that fair? There's nothing fair here, and we want to change this situation. And we will.
Не надо этого делать. Это нарушает нашу безопасность. Расширение НАТО. Нет, все равно делали. Разве это справедливо? Никакой справедливости здесь нет. И мы хотим поменять эту ситуацию. И мы добьемся этого.
YouTube is growing so fast that it has just overtaken Netflix to become the most popular app on TV. That's just on TV, by the way. If you combine TV, phones, computers, tablets, people are spending an insane amount of time watching YouTube. This is exactly why YouTube is paying creators $45,000 per minute. That's $64 million every single day. So, if you have ever thought about starting a YouTube channel for yourself, now is the perfect time. And if you're looking to learn how people grow on YouTube in 2025, like this guy who got millions of views in just few months of starting a channel, then I have a solution for you. This weekend, I'm holding a free bootcamp for beginners where I will share all our YouTube advice and answer any question you have about growing on YouTube. If you're interested in learning from this bootcamp, you can sign up by clicking the link in the description or scanning the QR code on your screen.